Brother, do you know? 1, 2, 3. Brother, do you know? Can you feel him here? Dad would have loved this. You might think this is an event for Judy Williams, and it certainly is. But Dad's what we call a social introvert. He loved crowds. He also loved to be quiet around crowds. But we are so glad that you have come to celebrate my dad's life tonight. So I'm going to do a little bit of up and down. It's not hot enough in here, so we're going to get you up and down just a little bit. So I need anybody to stand if you have had coffee at the bowling alley or at McDonald's on 24 Highway with my dad. Go ahead and stand for a second. We've got a winner. You might be the only one left, Gene. If you have received a brisket sandwich or bought one from my dad at Santa Calagon, please stand. That you paid for, Kyle, that you paid for. If you are family of Bob, any extended family, and my mom, it can even be my mom's family, and it can be those cousins that I've never even heard of, please stand. Oh, there are definitely cousins I never heard of. If you were ever a camper at a camp that my dad directed, please stand. Thank you. And if you have ever participated in any church service with my dad or community service with my dad, please stand. I'm going to read just a bit of I don't even call it an obituary. We had to have some words for speak, so we came up with something, and I'm just going to read a little part of that to give you just an idea of what Bob Williams was about. And then we're going to sing, so if you want to get your books ready for number 278, it's also in the program. You can also look in the program. A couple other announcements while we're doing some announcements is there is going to be ice cream with lots of toppings, so that's down in the foyer after this. If you have any cards or anything, there's a place that you can put those downstairs. Also, if you wanted to make any donations, there's a basket for donations that can be made to the Lions Club if you want, or you can make donations to Community of Christ. My dad was big on abolishing poverty and also youth camping, so any of those funds will go to those things. And then in the library, there is also a room off to the side down in the foyer that you can go in and just write a note if you'd like to write a note to the family. If you want to get out and you don't have time to stand in line and say your sympathies, then you can go ahead and go in there and just write a little message to the family. Oh, write something funny. My mom obviously needs a little uplifting, so write a little something funny. Dad liked funny little funny isms, and that might have sunk into me just a little bit. But I'll read a little bit about Robert Williams. Robert Lee Williams, we affectionately know him as Bob. Loving husband of Judy Williams, attentive and supportive father of Jeff, Julie, and Joey Williams, encouraging grandfather of Kyle and Hannah Lee, and adoring great-grandfather of Jones Robert Lee, who you will probably hear more than me during this service. He passed away Tuesday, July 12th, 2022, at the age of 85. Bob and Judy celebrated 66 years of marriage together in June. His older sister, Beverly Thomas, who we call Aunt June. I just found out some people call her Beverly, just like a few years ago. She passed away last year, leaving his younger sisters, Lois and Debbie, who missed them both dearly, I know that. He was brother-in-law and uncle to the Thomas family, the Norman family, the Campbell family, the Williams family, the Culp family, the Barker family, the Stevenson family, and all of their married names as well. Bob and Judy moved to Independence from Kingsville, Missouri in 1971 and served the church for 2 years in a program that was called Center Stake Peace Corps. Bob became president of Shoko Aluminum on the Independence Square in 1984, and he was still running the business when he passed, although Lori and Bill probably were running it a little bit more those last weeks and years. He leaves behind a strong legacy of faith and faithful ministry, dependability, integrity, commitment to community and community building, love of youth and youth camping, and a passion for service to friends, family, and others through his participation in organizations helping those in need, especially in the Lions Club and Community Services League's weekly neighborhood dinner that's held here in the basement, held at Stone Church. So we thank you so much for coming. If you're a speaker today and you don't want to come all the way up here, we have a mic right down there and a mic right over there so that you'll be able to speak when your time comes. And you'll see your something on the screen that will probably have your name on it, and you can just come up and do your part there. So we're going to sing hymn 278, There's a Church Within Us, O Lord, and I'll have you stand for that, and it will be followed by Anita Norman. I'll tell you when to stand. should be in your books. Oh, Julie took it out. It's in your books. Quick, 278. And I don't have a book. The words will be up on the screen. Here we go. There's a church within us, oh Lord. There's a church within us, oh Lord. Not a building, not a soul, not a portion, but a whole. There's a church within us, oh Lord. There's potential within us, oh Lord. Something stirring. Something straining to have birth. To be visible on earth. There's potential within us, oh Lord. There's some building to be done, oh Lord. There's some building to be done, oh Lord. Not with steel, not with stone, but with lives that share our road. There's the church to be built, oh Lord. There's the church within us, oh Lord. There's the church within us, oh Lord. Not a building, but one soul. Not a portion, but one whole. Lord, we are your church in the world.
Good evening. You two didn't tell me I was first. You just said early. So they asked me to speak to Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob is all I've ever known him by, Uncle Bob. And it was never just Uncle Bob. It was Uncle Bob and Aunt Judy, or Aunt Judy and Uncle Bob. That's the way it's always been for all of us as family, and hopefully I can do justice to what I have to say here about Uncle Bob. I had talked to Jeff and Julie a little bit, and Joey, more Joey and Julie probably, because Jeff wasn't feeling good at the visitation. But what I came up with to describe who Uncle Bob is to me, and I talked with my siblings, two of them on the way up here, this is what we feel Uncle Bob is to our family. I'm going to go to the scriptures. Keep alert. Stand firm in your faith. Be courageous, be strong. Let all you do be done in love. And that's from 1 Corinthians chapter 16, 13 through 14. That is Uncle Bob to our family. He has loved us in everything we've done. He's loved us in all of our celebrations and in all of our sorrows. He's always been there, and him and Aunt Judy, I don't know how they ever made it to everything with such a large family. But the one thing we could always count on is those two making it and showing us that they're there for us and that they love us. And that is Uncle Bob. This little sign thing here is getting me. You know that he loved every single one of us, And he loved people. He was just a great example to us as Uncle Bob. We could tell you stories upon stories about Uncle Bob and the love he shared with our family. The other scripture that I came across that really spoke to me as to who Uncle Bob is to me and to the family is from Colossians 3:12 through 17. And I'm going to read the whole thing. There is one word in there that I don't agree with. I would change it. It's called admonish, because I don't know that he ever admonished anybody. He just loved us. So this is what it says. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, Clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other, just as the Lord has forgiven you. So you must also forgive. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you are called in one body. Be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom, and with gratitude in your hearts, sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. That is our Uncle Bob. That is the spiritual leader of the extended family. That is who he has been. He's been our pastor, he's been our shepherd, and he's been our servant leader as a family. He has showed us by example, no judgment, only love. He showed us how to be a servant and how to serve like Christ to others, in service to others. That is who he is. I could tell you stories upon stories. I know he's been there in my happiest moments, and he's been there in my darkest moments, just to be there. And I know that we can all say the same thing. I know how much he means to my mom. I know how much he means to these guys up here. And you know what? There are no words, except I will say how sweet it is to be loved by Uncle Bob.
What a great guy. What a privilege it is to be here today and to think of my great friend, Bob. I'm gonna whistle the Old Path, and when I'm done, we're gonna sing verse 3 of the Old Path while I whistle it again, and it's on the third page of your bulletin there. And it's significant for you to know that the third verse is a powerful verse because it really represents that path that we walk on with our friends. And so that's an important verse for us to share today. Now, as we sing this verse together, I want you to think about where it was that you were with Bob last. Maybe it wasn't having coffee since there was only one person there. But maybe it was the time before that, and there were 10 people there. Or whether it was at a basketball game, or whether it was at a Lions Club meeting, or wherever it might have been. As we share in this together, I want you to think about where it was that you were with Bob on that path. All right? Let's sing together. I've got a lot of history with Bob. We certainly have done a lot of things together years ago in camps and those kinds of things. And for Bob, I would tap dance or I would walk hot coals barefoot for Bob. So Whistling's just a start today. You don't know what I might do next. I think that the last few years of Santa Caligon, just before the Lions quit doing their booth, was probably some of my best times with Bob. They were really great times because Judy wasn't there to talk. And I could spend all my time really having great conversation with Bob. And as you know, anytime Judy was around, that was hard to do, amen? Absolutely. I think we would both get up there early on any given day of Santa Caligon, and we would spend time together just chewing the fat. Nothing special, but just to be with Bob and to share with him. We really had a good time. I got to meet so many other guys that were in the Lions Club and everything, and it was always fun. The one thing I thought about today was we see all those T-shirts you'll see that say "Keep Calm," and then there's always a phrase after that. I thought, you know, what a great T-shirt that Bob could have had to keep calm. Bob's here. I mean, everything was okay when Bob was here. I remember early on doing camps when I was a kid and a young adult. You know, certainly Judy gave the marching orders and told everybody what to do. But it was always Bob that was there, that made everything be okay. And you knew it was going to be all right because Bob was there. Bob didn't have to say a lot, just his absolute presence was very special. I hope each one of you have those memories that you can share with those people that are here today, whether it's in the service or whether you share in the ice cream when we're done.
Well, Bob's family was very instrumental in the starting of the Kingsville Church. So without them, we'd have never had a church, that's for sure. And in 1947, there was a growing interest of the people, and they wanted to meet together as a group. And Lavina Williams, what they called her Grandma Lovey, was the one who opened her home for a meeting place in Kingsville. There were many times that we were invited out to Bob's home, which was his mom and dad, Ed and Nadine's, and we could have picnics or homemade ice cream or watermelon, hay rides, wiener roast, and it could go on and on and on. And this is a tradition that never stopped with Bob and Judy and their family, because they've opened their doors, maybe for conference people to stay or just anybody passing through or anybody that wanted to come and eat or whatever the case be. So they've been an asset to you in Independence, I'm sure, as well as in Kingsville. The first building we met in was a very dirty garage, and it really needed much cleaning, but it was a place to worship. Then in 1951, with volunteer help, a brick church was built on Highway 58 in Kingsville, and that was our new worship home. Bob and Judy were married there in 1956, and then after we sold that building, years later, Bob and Judy opened a grocery store in that same building. Bob was instrumental in the building of another larger brick church on the west side of Kingsville, and again, more volunteer help to get that accomplished. And our first meeting was in 1969, and it was dedicated in 1979. Bob has served as a youth director, church school director, and pastor for 7 years, from 1963 to 1967, and 1968 to 1970 in the Kingsville congregation. He was even a camp director for the stake at the junior high camp, and probably some that I don't even know about. Jeff and Julie were blessed in the Kingsville congregation. And I would like to say that Joy thinks he was part of Kingsville congregation, even if he wasn't born in Kingsville. He was born in Independence, but we would claim him. And Bob and Judy did an excellent job of raising their 3 kids, and of course, they love to spoil that little great-grandchild over there. Bob's ministry was shared by many with baby blessings, marriages, funerals, and so many other sacraments of the church. And as a kid growing up, volleyball was a big thing in our mission center, or stake at that time, and that's how a lot of the young people brought their friends, and I think that's how Bob connected up with his wife, Judy. Boy, you got sold down the river, didn't you? You know, you were a blessing to him, and very much. Bob was a quiet, gentle person. He worked with all, and he certainly lived a good life. Surely God will say, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
To me, Bob was a quiet, gentle man. He was kind of like E.F. Hutton. When Bob spoke, everybody listened. When Leonard and I first got engaged, I was sitting one night and I was thinking of couples that I would like to be remembered by. The first one that came to mind was my grandmother and grandfather. The other one was my mom and dad. The other one was Bob and Judy. The reason these three couples came to my mind was because when you thought of them, you never thought of just Grace or June or Judy. It was always Pete and Grace, Virgil and June, Bob and Judy. It was as if they were one, in sync with each other. I looked up the word sync, and one of the definitions of it was deeply and firmly. I think that about sums their life up. That pretty well sums everything up, except that Bob's smile wasn't just a smile. His smile touched your soul. Bob will always be loved and never forgotten. I love you, Bob and Judy, forever.
The voice you just heard was my sister, Carolyn Whiting. In 1960, when I was 8 years old, my father was asked to be the pastor of the Kingsville congregation. I remember I didn't want to go. I had my cousins and my friends at the church that we were attending. But you know what? Moving to Kingsville was the best thing of my life, because it was there that my dad met Bob and Judy and made them the youth leaders. And that's where it all began. So I have my dad to thank for bringing them into my life. And I went on the trip this last week with Joey and Judy and Sandy Gamay to Washington, D.C. I'm really probably Judy's oldest daughter, and she just doesn't know it. I have gone to reunions, I have gone to camps. Anywhere they went, I was there because I watched Jeff and I watched Julie when they were busy doing other things. So I always say I'm their oldest child. But they asked me if I would say something, and I said, I have someone else in mind that would be an even better idea. And that was my brother-in-law and my sister. My brother-in-law, they made a video, but it didn't come through. So I have a hard copy of what my brother-in-law wrote, and I would like to read that to you now. The Rare Life of Bob Williams. Many times when someone attempts to address someone's life, their accomplishments, their temperament, and most of all, what has their life meant to their friends, their family, their differences they have made to those that had the privilege of knowing them, we fall short in really mentioning how important their life has been to so many. We tend to focus on the loss, but in Bob's case, we need to focus on just how many times he has touched us in our times of need. I had the privilege of knowing Bob when I was a young boy and growing into a young man. And in many ways, because of his mentoring and the examples that Bob set for so many young men and women, and by living a life that not only reflected kindness, compassion, and pure love, but a trait that no one was his enemy, and everyone he touched, even if they had shortcomings, they still were loved and forgiven by him. Another very unusual and rare trait nowadays that Bob possessed was his undaunting, dedication to always putting someone's needs before his own. His integrity and honesty were spotless, and without fail, he always accomplished everything he promised he would, and I believe Bob would have given all he had before he would break a promise. Those traits are rare to never nowadays. Some individuals pass and little is noticed, or they are forgotten quickly. But Bob will be missed forever, and his passing will tear a hole in not only his close universe, but his passing will leave voids in countless individual lives, and in some cases, some that knew Bob will never heal completely. When we are feeling down, just think about Bob and think about how he would handle a situation that seems unsurmountable, and immediately the hurdles become a short step up. When those of us that knew Bob the best are feeling sad because of the lost, just compare your feelings with how Bob would handle the same situation, and then you can begin to realize that yes, he's not present, but all the things he represented, all of his kind gestures and understanding, but most of all, throw his personality in and his never-ending love into the bad times, and all things become positive and easily overcome. Then, and only then, will you realize you truly are and were blessed by knowing him, and that will make him present. Though not the same as being there, will you realize just how strong and how steadfast his quiet and kind outlook on life was. Even though he is not present in body, he still lives on in everything he touched in life. Leonard Whiting.
Like most of you here, I have great memories of Bob over the years. However, my most recent and longest memory of him is as a faithful volunteer to the Stone Church Neighborhood Dinner, which it started in 2009. It was the neighborhood dinner the Stone Church started, but right before the pandemic, CSL took this dinner over, and I am just really proud to say that that dinner is still going today after many, many years, and Bob was one of our very faithful who would hardly ever, unless he had to, miss one of the dinners. But I'm not certain how many of you know that he did volunteer for many, many years. And when they came over from College Park Church, both Judy and Bob jumped into the activities at Stone Church, both feet down. And they were very involved. Judy volunteered in the kitchen quite often, fixing dinners. And I remember one night in particularly that she was rolling burritos up. And I did not think that, we would ever get all that cheese onto the burritos. There was so much, but it was amazing. She was an excellent cook, as most of you all already know. But anyway, at that same time, they both quickly got enmeshed in the activities here and loved every minute of what they were doing. Wednesday nights, Bob showed up regularly, rarely missed a night, even really until he just got to the point where he was ill and he could not attend anymore. But he was a faithful volunteer, one of our most faithful ones that we've ever had. But Bob started out in several different roles with the dinner. Sometimes he would help on the serving line, dishing up the food. Then every time then that we would have another need, he would volunteer quickly to take that role. And he went out and would serve the people that came just as they came in the room, and would sit and bring them one of their dishes and put it before him. So he served as a guest minister at those nights too. They had a group of people from Stone Church that were ministers, and Bob served in that capacity. And Many times people would need to have a prayer or to know that they were loved and had a concern that needed to be, have a minister to help them talk through. I'm going to read the rest of this. Eventually, the role Bob had been unknowingly preparing for opened up for him when a volunteer had to step down. The role of the greeter and the roll attendant, you know, somebody has to make check marks on who attended that day. This volunteer role was very significant because it represented the first contact that the guests would have when walking through the doors. Bob was perfect at this for so many reasons that you can probably guess. First, his warm, inviting smile made him approachable. Guests were not afraid of entering the room, coming through the doors, because they saw Bob's friendly face reflected and a genuine look of acceptance and welcome when they may not always receive this in other places. Second, he used this opportunity to get acquainted with the guests, each week asking them how their week was, what had been happening, questions about their health, questions about their family, questions about any concerns that they might have or bring up. He always took time to visit with them. His way of showing and conveying acceptance and respect for them, they felt this strongly. They felt this genuine warmth and concern that possibly they hadn't always received in other locations. Third, he would ask them weekly to sign their name on a roster along with their family members who were in attendance with them. Because Bob was trusted, they willingly and did not hesitate to sign their name and comply with what was asked. And lots of times that is not necessarily the situation, but Bob made them feel safe that it was okay. Their signature of attendance at the dinner was necessary because harvesters who provided a major portion of our donated food requested these signatures so that they could document our attendance. These things may not seem like they are very complicated. They might sound like they're easy things to do, to be a greeter, to welcome people, to carry on a conversation. But however, many of our guests who came through that door had all types of difficulties and problems that homelessness and food insecure people currently carry with them wherever they go. Oftentimes, these problems could escalate if not made to feel accepted and welcome, just as they were. Bob's smiling and welcoming face was their first impression that conveyed to them the safety, the security, and acceptance of this place where they were welcome, where they could receive food, fellowship, and love. Thanks, Bob, for always radiating your generous smile, acceptance, and love. Our guests at the neighborhood dinner felt this over and over, just as all of us in this very room, in this sanctuary, have felt it so many times during our life. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
A couple of slides ago on the screen, there is a picture of 6 very pale white young men. That was the beginning group of what you've already heard was the Center Stake Peace Corps. It was in September of 1971 that I first met Bob and Judy, who had been recruited, I'm sorry to say, to leave where they were and to come to Independence to join this unique, one-of-a-kind program that was initiated by then Stake President Ray Huggett and later Bob Brew, and was championed and led by Dick Hetrick. I can't begin to tell you all of the experiences that we shared together, many of them hilarious, including pictures that Bob was part of when we went down to the Lake of the Ozarks. It was titled Walking on the Water, and it showed people looking as if they were walking on the water. And Bob was one of them who, with the rest of us, would walk out and try to find those cement blocks to stand on. But what was so neat was that we were together as a unified group that, under the leadership of the stake, were involved with many groundbreaking activities. And I'm confident that what Bob and I and others learned in that experience changed our lives and opened up avenues of service and ministry that was much broader and bigger than any of us had ever had previously. And so I think about Bob first in that context, but that was 50 years ago. And I'm having trouble, I'm sorry to say, remembering all the little details. But all you need to know is that was both Bob and Judy. I've been talking about Bob, but they came together and they were assigned a certain dimension of the operation in Center Stake, which was the youth, obviously. And they worked with all the very many congregations and their youth leaders for the 2 years that they were done. And by the way, they were paid. Yeah, they were paid, but you could still probably better call it a volunteer, because when you were paid $200 a month to be a Center Stake Peace Corps member, it was necessary to have lots of fun. But it was terrific, and I look back on those days with a lot of fond memories. But I also want to say that that was not the end of their highly visible ministry that I was also part to see them and be part of in a small way, and that is in the neighborhood councils. They lived, along with us and hundreds of others, in what we call Neighborhood 10. Proctor neighbor. Nobody else knows what the numbers mean, except those of us who still vaguely remember the boundaries. But they were where the people were that were their neighbors, and Bob and Judy were present in a big way, and I have many memories of them being involved and showing up. That activity that they helped make successful ultimately led to the city receiving an All-America City Award. And I can't help but believe that the seeds and ministry and service that they gave, along with others, made a big, big difference. I just want to add one other comment before I end, and Betty said so beautifully about the dinner. You know, that dinner lasted 10 years for Stone Church, still going, of course, as Betty mentioned. But I want you to remember that they were not just a few people who showed up. It was often 175, 200, 300 on one occasion I can remember, that filled Floor A from front to back and every side. And Bob was constantly there, as Betty said. I thought of him not so much as a greeter, but as Betty mentioned, we called them chaplains. And Gary, who's sitting back there, was our trainer of chaplains. And Bob was the first chaplain people met. They may not have known the title, but they knew the experience. I cannot tell you how many wonderful memories I have of Bob and I sitting together, starting about a half hour after the dinner would be underway. And we would sit there whenever I had the time to get over there, but Bob was always there, no matter how late they came in. And he and I would just talk about the people that we were seeing there and loving and serving and trying to help, and about many of the desperate circumstances that their lives were defined by. It was, for me, a beautiful ministry together that Bob shared in and led, and will never be forgotten, not just by those of us in this room, but I am sure if I took his picture and showed it to people who came to the dinner, they'd say, "Oh yeah, I remember that guy. He was always the first one I saw." And it's true. They never would forget him because he was, in fact, unforgettable. Thanks.
So this is the story of how Bob became a salesman. Who knew? Bob and Judy had built a new house in Kingsville, out in the country, actually, about 2 miles out of town. Whenever a minister or a missionary came to the church to speak and needed a place to stay, they were sent to Bob and Judy's because they had an extra bedroom. During this time, there was a man from California who came to stay. He would tell Bob to get his books, and they would go into the other room and talk church and missionary work. It was during these talks that Bob was told by this man that he needed to learn to sell things. Bob is a rather quiet, reserved person, so you didn't think of him as a salesman. But this man, who was an ardent missionary, kept telling Bob, "You've got to learn to sell something. You can't sell the gospel unless you know how to sell something, so you've got to learn." Judy thought, "Oh my goodness, I do not see my husband as a salesman." Soon after this, Bob and Judy moved to Independence to work for the church in the Peace Corps. When their work for the Peace Corps was over, Bob knew he needed to get a job. The bottom was falling out of the economy, so do we go back to Kingsville or stay in Independence? They decided to stay in Independence. So as he was trying to get work, it seems that the only job he could find was with the company Kennedy and Cohen. This company paid you as they trained you, so they decided that that's what Bob would try. He quickly became top salesman there, to the surprise of everyone. One day his boss, who was from New York, said to him in surprise, "You just sell to people by being nice to them." When Kennedy and Cohen closed, Bob went to work for Ted Schaus Company, or Shoko, around 1975. It wasn't long until he became the head of sales, and after about 10 years working and being the top salesman, Bob became president around 1985 and later bought Shoko in around 1990. Since Bob was a young boy, he had always had the guidance of godly parents, grandparents, and many devoted people before him. He always tried to let God lead the way, and this job at Shoko certainly seemed to be something that he had been led to. Bob has had many blessings over the last 47 years in this business venture, 32 of those owning the company, with many valuable employees. But one very devoted employee, Bill Shipley, stands out. Bill has stuck with Bob, even in hard times, but especially these last few years while Bob was dealing with all his health issues. Bob had faith and faithful employees who have kept his business running. Shoko has been in business since 1949, and from what I understand, was one of the first businesses in Kansas City to offer awnings and storm doors. The business had expanded to include just about anything to improve the outside of your home. The awnings and storm doors are still made in the shop, and you can see them all over town. Bob has many friends and business associates that will miss his smile and good nature.
You know, I might not be the best person up here to be talking about Bob, or Lion Bob. Few things I want to set straight before we get started. Their storm windows will get dirty. They will get dirty. Just understand that, they will. But Bob was very faithful. He would send my wife a postcard reminding her that they were dirty and it was time that I should wash them. I mean, he's a thoughtful man, you know. He really was.
You're good. Keep going.
Am I too loud?
You're barely too loud.
Okay. All right. And another thing, too, it hasn't come up yet, but I don't believe he ever dumped the basketball at Kingsville either. I don't think so. I first met Bob. I expect it was probably in '75 when they did come up here, and I had the group insurance at Shoko, and I don't know how it worked out, but we we just got along well together, and we'd start having coffee, and well, we might told some lies. I miss told stories, but we stayed together. If we were in a crowd, the two of us were not far apart, and as you go through life, if you have one or two good friends, I think you're extremely lucky. And I think I had one real fine friend there. I hope I did my part too, but he was always there. Well, Bob asked me to be a founding member of the Lions Club, and I turned him down. It seemed to me like I had way too many things to do, but finally he talked me into it, I think in 89 or 90, and he was my sponsor. And we've had lots and lots of friends and lots of good times, and we brought up the Lions Club in our booth up on the square. Well, Bob and I and another Lion, Larry Cleveland, was our job at about 6 o'clock in the morning to get the booth ready and working on that. So a lot of fun there. Bob was the kind of guy that never said much, but when he talked, everybody was still and listened. He was just a good guy. He was, it was important what he said. And I'm lucky to have him as a friend. And I thank you all for coming to support Bob. Thank you. I met him at Choco, and I don't know, he and I just kind of hit it off. I have no idea how or why, but I don't visit back and forth. A lot of times we go over to the bowling alley for coffee. It just kind of became a routine. Well, not exactly. He really wanted me to be one of the founding members, and gosh, with the family and everything, and working by appointments and office hours too, and then doing so much in Little League baseball and Pop Warner football and basketball coaching. All I needed was another meeting to go to. So, but he kind of kept after me, talking about that. And I think in '89, okay, I'll join. And so he was my sponsoring member. Bob was I know he was president early on and he was just kind of a natural leader. I mean, it was kind of when Bob talked, everybody listened. That just, the kind of guy he was, and always had good ideas and was always, I think, real upbeat. I don't think I ever heard anything really negative out of Bob. We can do this. This is the way we'll do it, and okay, everybody pulled and went the same way, and worked great. They asked me to be president, so I could barely spell Lions at that time, but it all worked out real good. Just had a good time. Well, I believe Santa Caligan was probably the most fun. He and I, our job was to get up early and open it up, and 6:30 or 7, we'd go up and get everything ready, and get the fire started, get it all cleaned up, and then we'd take off and go have breakfast and come back and go to work. That was just a routine for years, and then later on when things kind of slowed down, we'd go up and meet. We'd walk around the square and look at all the booths and stuff, and then go have breakfast and then go home. Honest, dependable, words as good as that's his bond. If I said I'll do it, okay, then no more. You don't have to follow up. is going to be done. Now, he wasn't quite so good on washing the windows now at the house. Now, that is, he might have been a little careless with these warranties on the washing the windows, but but no, Bob, a great companion, good guy to be around, a lot of fun. Never anything negative about anybody at any time. Just is all, I think, very positive, and always. He had a kind of a mischievous way about him too. He had little jokes you had to kind of stop him. Pretty good. Just a fine guy to be around. It was, and you never had to worry about anything. It's just there. I guess just seeing him. Memories are good.
Gonna sing my Lord. 1, 2, 3. Gonna serve my Lord. Gonna sing. Gonna sing.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. Again, my name is Kyle Lee. I am Bob's grandson. A friend of mine recently said it's very difficult to lose such a big foundational part of your family. That word foundational really hit home for me. There were 3 names that I had for Bob. It was Grandpa, Dad, and the boss. From a very early age, I definitely took advantage of the boss. Especially when it came to anything glass and windows. Croquet ball goes through the window mysteriously. Grandma, don't worry. Grandpa can fix that. Intentionally taking the glass panes out of the lights and dropping them on the cement. Mailman comes by. Don't worry about it. My grandpa can fix that. Playing catch at my friend's Melissa's house with rocks. One of them got away from me, goes right through the double pane window. "Don't worry, Melissa, calm down. My grandpa can fix that." So eventually I came to an age where the boss could put me to work to recoup some of those expenses. Grandpa moved like clockwork. Lawn was to be mowed by Thursday to show off Grammy's lawn for the whole weekend. Then we'd head up to Showco, spray paint about 1,000 screws after hand screwing them all into a board for several hours. The work was tedious, it was tiring. When you're 13 years old mowing a 15-foot, 45-degree bank, you're going to find a great respect for the man that does this weekly and effortlessly. By the time I got to high school, running and winning sprints was second nature. It was the foundational work ethic that Dad had instilled in me without me even realizing it. When I reached my junior year in college, there was an incident on the basketball team, and we made a decision that one of our teammates was being treated unfairly by a coach, and the three captains, we were all going to make a point and walk out and quit the team. At age 20, in your head, this sounds like a great plan. So I called my mom first, and she said, "You gotta speak with the boss." So, as many know, Bob was a man of little words, which means that every word that he says has great value. He told me that he was very proud of me for sticking up for my friend, but he felt that I had more to offer through basketball. The following year, as the JV head coach, we made our first appearance in school history for the conference championship. 3 years later, I was helping turn around the high school 2 minutes from Bob's house through sports and education. It's like he knew something. I've been so blessed to have spent so much time with my grandpa. I will always cherish the moments of sitting up at the up dog, just discussing life with him. It was always great having a spare hand to come and sweep the floors whenever you needed somebody to. I didn't even have to ask, he would just do that. Dad, you were a very big foundation in my life I needed, and I pray that one day I can instill that foundation within my kids and their kids.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a little assistance there, Jay. Thank you. Thank you. Quick little story of how I came to meet this amazing family. It's my sophomore year. Blue Springs South sophomore team is playing William Chrisman Blue Springs tournament. We're 0-15. Terrible. It's the fourth quarter. I'm 5'7", size 13 shoes. And I'm at the free throw line. And I'm dribbling the ball off my foot. This young man on Chrisman picks the ball up, hands it to me with a smile across his face like, "You might need this, idiot." Fast forward 2 years later, Kyle and I crossed paths again, and we're playing basketball, lots of basketball. Bob loves basketball. We're at Kyle's for his graduation, high school graduation, and Kyle introduces me, formally to his grandfather, and he says, "Grandpa, this is Julio. This is going to be the point guard at Graceland." And, Bob looks at me and says, "Point guard? Well, I'm glad I'm done playing now." So, Bob and I had many similarities, including both of us in our love of basketball. We both played the point. I also never dunked at Kingsville High School. And we even shared the same numbers. I'm 6'5", Bob's 5'6". So clearly we're carbon copies. Kyle sent me some pictures of Bob in his what was that, 1954, 55, Kingsville High School. He was wearing number 42. And in that time, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure many of us remember, that's Jackie Robinson's number. So Bob, he just had the foresight, okay? Bob thoroughly enjoyed watching basketball. He loved watching Kyle play. He loved watching his niece Heather, his nephews Billy and Sean, and he had a personal chauffeur in Jeff to all these games. And many times he came to our games at Graceland, and just many people have spoken and said that Bob was a man of few words, but when he spoke, everyone listened. Well, you're at Clawson. I know many of you have been at Graceland. It echoes in there, blah blah blah. But I remember one time after a game, we got blown out, whatever. We're all talking, blah blah blah, and then Bob walks up to me and says, "You remember when Kyle gave you that ball? You're gonna need that. Quit turning the ball over." Sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Some words that I used to describe Bob to me in my experiences. Again, meeting Kyle, spending many times on Julie's couch, and one thing that you know about this family is they smile from ear to ear, all of them. Bob was a man that's family-oriented, how I saw him. He was loving, he was soft-spoken, he was community-driven, and he was happy. I think that's something a lot of us forget to be. We're not blessed to have tomorrow or the next 10 minutes. But while we're here, we have the opportunity to be happy, because that happiness and that smile is infectious to all of us. And we want to be welcoming to others and help each other as we, go down our paths. So my time around this family has always been that of love and caring. Bob cultured that. The always welcome feeling at Julie's home and at Judy's home. You always felt welcome. Kyle always has the biggest smile at any friend gathering. Bob cultured that. And finally, point guard is the head coach on the floor. They basically set up, your teammates for success. You're doing all the dirty work on both sides of the floor. You got to set up your defense. You got to get your big ogres to move their feet. Okay, you got to get your shooters the ball. Okay, you got to be able to do all that stuff and be able to say the right things or not say the right things. Bob is the point guard of the Williams family. He is and will forever be. The culture that he created with his teammates, which is his family, is that of love. And I strive for my family and my 3 little kids that this room is it's great. We're celebrating a life, and it's just an amazing feeling to be in here right now. And I really thank you for the opportunity. And I love you guys, and thank you, Bob, for sharing some time with me in your journey.
The first time I visited Independence, I went to Santa Caligon, where I ate a whole fried onion for the first time. We do eat cheese, smelly cheese, and frogs in France. And also we do eat horses and snails, but actually we do not eat whole fried onions. Another thing that I ate for the first time there was brisket, prepared and sold by Brother Williams for the Lions Club. Brisket meat is still something I love to eat to this day. I spent many weeks in Independence, Missouri, translating for church events. I had the opportunity to stay at Brother and Sister Williams' place. My days as a translator were busy, and when I went home the evenings, I enjoyed watching TV on the sofa next to Brother Williams, who was sitting on his armchair. Bob didn't speak much, and so did I, and that was actually perfect, as I needed to rest. And anyway, Sister Williams was so good for the talking, and for the singing too. Still, I sometimes asked lots of questions to Bob about his church experience and his family history in the church. It was clear that Bob was a man of faith and commitment. Bob also liked to share about his ministry in Europe and in Paris, and how one day it was difficult for him to find a good burger in Paris, and actually it still is today. I remember also Bob driving me to the temple, as I had to work there. Sometimes we'll stop by his workplace on the square. All the people we will meet on the way knew Bob, who seemed to be a celebrity in Independence. I also recall him telling me that he had morning breakfasts at McDonald's with his friends. Something I also remember that Brother Williams loved sweets and chocolates. Joey used to do catering and all sorts of chocolates and sweets, laying on the living room table. Surely, this living room should then have been the gathering place of Zion. And as the chocolates were laying on the table of the living room, Brother Williams will just walk around the table somewhat nervously, talking and asking questions to Joey, until he finally got a chocolate. Sometimes I will end the walking and the talking by asking the question Brother Williams was surely waiting for. "You want a chocolate, Brother Williams?" I also recall that Brother Williams served food at the Stone Church congregation. One time he invited me to join him for this ministry. I was surprised to see so many people in need. Single men, young adults, single mothers, families. Bob was kind and considerate with each of them, serving them food as Christ actually served food to the multitude. I only participated once. It was enough for me. It was a difficult ministry. But Brother Williams ministered every week. Indeed, he was a man of faith and commitment.
Am I on? Okay. Yeah, well, yeah. What do I have in my mouth? I don't smoke, okay? So what makes a man have this many people show up and to be probably not saying 2 words to any of us if he was in this crowd? I am convinced that the best ministers are not those who speak well, but those who listen well. And Bob listened. In a time in my life when I was in junior high and I had nothing ahead of me, a poor family life, a bad future possibly, I went to one of Bob and Judy's junior high camps, and it changed my life. And I was a receiver of the spiritual fatherhood of Bob. And I got to share that when I became a youth minister with Bob's youngest kid. It was tough. And Joey got to be my kid's youth minister for a time. Think about that. How little waves go down and become bigger and bigger. This is how I experiences Bob's ministry. And there are a few Bobisms that have come in my life that come to the top. And the first one is when I was a young adult youth minister, and I had asked Bob and Judy to come and help me as a full-time youth minister to be the minister for the chosen group of youth that anyone could ever want to minister to, those who are in junior high. And Bob and Judy jumped at the chance. I don't know, maybe not jumped, but you went for it, okay? And I remember there were many times where I got the opportunity to just sit and talk with Bob and share a little bit with him and get a few of his pieces of wisdom. One of which was when I was about 25 and he was a generation ahead of me, I asked him, man, junior high camp really kills me. How do you do it, Bob? Am I going to be like you when I get older? And I said, what is it like to be your age? And he said, well, you don't have hair where you want it, and you have hair where you don't want it. Bobisms. Now, I don't do hardly any impressions of people, but I'm going to attempt one of Bob. On occasion, I would ask Bob to do something, and I knew what Bob's limit usually was. But at times, I would ask him something on purpose just to get this response from him. And it would be something like, hey, Bob, we're having a stake conference, and there's going to be about 500 people there. Would you say something about junior high camp? Or I would say to him, hey, Bob, I really don't agree what Judy is doing right now. Would you go tell her that she's doing something wrong? And this is the response. I've worked on this really hard. This is Bob's response. That's Bob. Thank you. And I would love to come up with scenarios that I would get that response from. It's the joy of my life. When I was in junior high, as I mentioned, I went to a camp, and I was so turned on by the experience that I went back home and I asked my mom, Bob and Judy are doing another camp next week in another jurisdiction. Can I please go to that one too? And my poor mother, God rest her soul, found the money to send me to the second camp. And I went to 2 camps that year, and it changed my life. And I saw the effect that Bob had on people. People would go to him because they knew they could just sit with him. I would watch youth in my group who would love to watch Judy on stage, but would love to talk with Bob in the back row when everybody was gone. And I saw that ministry carry on through his life and touch me in a way where I recognize now more than ever what it means to listen. I saw Bob once at a junior high camp, late in the night, with flashlights and search groups looking for the one camper who had successfully run away from a camp. And they looked all over, late into the night, calling his name, until finally the boy decided to let himself be found and went under a street light and was scooped up into the arms of the camp pastor and not reprimanded, but said, "I'm so glad we found you." I was that boy. Bob was that minister. You're a better minister based on how you listen and how you act. And Bob was a great minister.
We are one in the Spirit.
The early years. Bob was 85. I'm not. It was interesting that I got that designation, dear friends, for the early years. I'll find you later. I'm a Kleenex kind of guy. Who else here was raised by Judy and Bob Williams? Who else? See what family we are? Odessa Hills. I'm gonna stay there. So for those of us who kind of pointed back at the rest of you as city slickers, like the McLaughlins, so pardon me for a little bit of a time. You go north of Odessa on 131. You go around a couple of curves, and then you pull off on a gravel road. And you start slowing down. Because you know where you're going. Yeah. You know what's going to happen. So you pull on into the campgrounds. Yes, I have the sign. It was this close. I have the RLDS church camp sign in the back of my car right now. I was so tempted to just put it up here. When we sold it, I kept it. You vote the way you want to vote, I'll vote the way I want to. Find Rick Maupin, find out which way I voted. So you go on, and we tent camped in those days. We didn't have anything fancy like air conditioning, of course, back in those days. We all tent camped. And where they did, they tell them the stories of back when you were young, that there was not the lower lake that was having all the hogs drifted, yeah. So, but there was a camping area and the tents were there. And then my mom is part of this. And there was a couple of tents, if you will. If you go on the journey with me, there was a couple of tents and we were parked next to each other and camped next to each other. The Williams family and the Watson family. Mom talked about, she goes, yeah, Bob was there. He was always so quiet and nice. And he was married to Judy. And I can remember she had a leather flippy floppy fringe jacket on and always had a guitar. She was trying to find a way to the microphone, I'm sure. And they hadn't realized just how beautiful that ministry was at that point, I bet you. And they found out, didn't they, sister? The camps. It's not all about camps, but so much of that. As an adult, we tried so hard to bring the youth program back, and we did such an awesome job. And there's one of the youth right there that went to camps with my boy. I can remember being in the big tabernacle. There's not a picture of it now. And we were trying so hard, and we were trying to get the kids' attention. And Bob would show up because he had to put in a little bit of time at work. He says, well, Bruce, somebody had to pay for this, is what he would tell me. And he would show up, and we would be trying to get the kids' attention and trying to pull and listen to them. And there would just be that smile, no words. And he would have that huge, beautiful smile as you were trying to be like him. We did this thing, and I understand it's starting to come back. We did this thing called Trail of Virtues. You guys heard of that? Yeah. I'm telling you, I'm taking you on a journey. I hope you can get there with me. With nighttime luminaries. And we had a stack of virtues. Which one shall we fit? Which one fits with the youth of this camp? And everything that I thought about Bob came back to the Trail of Virtues. All of it did. Some of those virtues might be honor, courage, compassion, respect, patience, grace, love, forgiveness, humility, kindness, gratitude. My friend Bob was a virtuous man.
Thank you.
We are one, we are one, we are one. We are one, we are one, we are one. We are one, we are one, we are one. We are one with each other, we will walk side in hand. We will walk with each other, we will walk hand in hand. And together we'll spread the news that God is in our land. And they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love.
I am not 6'5" or 5'6". So, You just get the feeling that all the important things in life are right here in our hands tonight. So it's good to be a part of it. So I'm going to start with something Bob and Judy taught Greg and I. And if you've ever been any kind of full-time minister, you will understand this. And one of the things that Bob and Judy taught us is that if you are a full-time minister, you are doing ministry at a camp, you should take your kids with you. Because I remember that little squirt, Joey Williams, being there when I was a camper. But one of the things that Greg and I committed to when Greg became the youth minister, and when we were doing youth ministries volunteer work even before that, was that we would take our kids to camp. Because if we didn't see each other for a whole summer as a family. And so it became very important to us. But consequently, what happens with that, when you are married to a youth minister, is even when you're at camp, Bethany will understand this, even when you're at camp with your family, you really don't see your spouse that much. And I was sharing with Julie, just after Bob's passing, about being at camps with Bob when I first had Eli, and then Eli and Ian at camp, and then Eli, Ian, and Addison at camp, and then Eli and Ian and Addison and Ishbel at camp. And repeatedly, I remember during those times that you're trying to keep your kids contained so that they don't interrupt camp as well. That didn't happen with Joey, but... just kidding. No. But you are trying to keep your kids contained. And there are numerous times where Bob would not say a word, not a word. Sometimes he'd say hello or how are you doing? But most of the time he did not say a word, and often I'd be sitting in that back row with all the kids lined up, coloring or whatever. And Bob would just come over and he would put one hand on my shoulder and one hand on my arm and squeeze it. And it would just be that presence of, I'm here and I'm taking care of you. And his presence mattered to me. It mattered to me, and it was the first thing that I thought of when I learned of Bob's passing. And so I am so grateful for that. And when Joey sent the order last night for this evening, and I saw that word impact, I thought of what impact did, Bob have on me in that way. And you can ask Greg. I often am very aware of people with young children out in places and at restaurants and things, and often spend some time watching them. And before we leave the restaurant, we'll go over and say, wow, what a beautiful family. And that's Bob's impact on me. That's who taught me that. So thank you. Love you guys.
We are one, we are one, we are one. We are one, we are one, we are one. They'll know us by our love. By our love, they'll know us by our love. By our love, they'll know us by our love. By our love, they'll know us by our love. By our love, they'll know us, we will work. With each other we will work. Side by side and together, each one's dignity. They'll know us by.
As I sat over there, it's quite amazing how you just sense the Spirit. And whenever Julie asked me a few days ago, I would constantly find myself collecting some thoughts. And it's quite remarkable how many threads have been pulled of stuff that I've been thinking from everyone else. I remember the Williams family when I first started the camps in Odessa. But that's not what I want to talk about. The Bob that I remember right now, I think, is sitting up on some bleachers with that big smile. Growing up, I can remember every time going to games, whether I was a kid or a youth minister, it was that smile. And when I think of Bob's legacy, the word fan comes to mind. And I want to connect those qualities of being a fan with Bob. The first one, I think of somebody that's loyal. You know, in all the causes that you've heard about today, Bob was very loyal. You know, his presence. He showed up week after week after week after week. And I think that was a true testament of who he was. And today, I see that loyalty in his son, Jeff. And I know that that legacy is going to live on. When I think of being a fan, I think of having unwavering support. You know, Bob had a spirit of generosity, you know, and that's something I greatly admired about him. When I think about this quality, I think of Julie. If any of you guys have ever run a camp, can't do it without her. Half the time you don't even know that she's there, but she makes it happen. And I see that from what Bob instilled in her. And so his legacy is going to live on. Being a fan requires being a cheerleader. Now, I can't see Bob doing, you know, whatever, the toe touches and stuff like that. I'm not sure that was his thread. And he wasn't the boisterous type of cheerleader, but he was the silent, just, I'm in your corner. I'm always going to root for you. When I think about that, I know it's not Joey style, but that same person being in your corner, rooting for you, telling you to dream big dreams, to shoot for the moon. That's what Bob did, silently. Joey does it differently, but I know that that legacy is going to live on because of that virtue that was instilled in him. The last thing that kind of comes to mind of being a fan is the word love. And it makes me think of the love that Bob and Judy had together. Clearly, everything that they did, they were a team. You know, they worked so hard with each other and they complemented each other perfectly. You know, Judy was out in front, Bob was behind the scenes. It fit perfectly together. And I know that his legacy is going to live on because of that. They say that your true character is who you are when no one is watching. And when I watched Bob growing up, he certainly characterized that. You know, he was always willing to go the extra mile to make sure that things would be as perfect as they possibly could be. So I hope his legacy will continue to live on in the loyalty, in the spirit of generosity, in the hope, in the optimism, in the support, and in the love.
So going towards the end, you get to piggyback on other people's ideas and concepts. So I'll be, David mentioned the quiet, and the campground, Odessa Hills, has come up several times. And that's where I met Bob and Judy. And I'll be speaking to 3 concepts that carried through with me that I learned from Bob. I had a unique opportunity to come back to camp the very next year after finishing junior high camp. They had to create a new position for me. It was a PA. Nobody knew what a PA was, but they said, just go do whatever you can to make camp go better. And I went pretty much everywhere with Bob and Judy trying to make sure camp went better. But I learned a lot that first week, that first year of being on staff. These are going to go in reverse order of importance. Have fun. What I mean by that is As a camper, you have a water balloon fight, or somebody creates this 30-foot cardboard slide down a hill, and it just seems like these things just happen. And you're like, this is just magical. Everything is happening. We go serenade the girls in the evening. Your cabin sneaks out and steals a little thing of pudding. And you're like, nobody knows, and it's so much fun. And then you're on staff, and you realize the camp director knows everything that's going on. And it's just this amazing concept of there's a line. We don't want to let them cross the line, but let them have fun. And that was a huge thing that I was able to take with me everywhere I've gone and to every camp I've gone to since then. Everyone has value and is a child of God. And that's important for those quiet moments. My job that first week was to run around, make sure things get done. And as I was observing what was going on, it freed Bob up to sit and have those quiet conversations with people in the back of the tabernacle or on the side wall where people would just kind of sit and gather. Or there's a couple trees up on the hill that a couple kids would sit in the shade. And you'd see Bob just kind of walking around. And he wouldn't say much. He would just, how are you doing? And then he would listen to what the kid has to say, because that child has value. And he would instill that child has value. Regardless of how many friends you had before you came to camp, as a staff, our job was to make sure that child was incorporated into the camp and that they had value, so when they went home, they knew they had a family. And that's what camp was able to provide for so many kids, was you have value and you are a child of God. I didn't know this was going to be a theme until I got the text last night. The third thing was to be still and know. To be still and know that God is around. As a staff, our job was to cultivate an environment, whether it's a campfire or a classroom or a trail of virtues or whatever was going on that evening, was to allow the rowdy and rambunctious to occur, but then to slowly step it down so that everybody had the opportunity to be quiet and be still and know that God was there. So that everybody at that camp, staff, kids, the little kids who were running around, everybody had the opportunity to sit and know that God is in our presence, or we are in God's presence. And that relationship can be cultivated because we as staff, or we as campers, were taking the time to be quiet and to listen and let that soak in and let that wash over us. These three things I was able to take with me to 30 other camps that I've been a co-director or the director of in the states, Iowa, Arizona, California, and Mexico. And I've been in weddings of kids who I've cultivated these things with. And these are all themes that I learned from that very first week and every week that I was on staff since then. That very first week, I was given a little plaque that says, even the greatest oak started off as a little nut. And so I still have this. And my wife accuses me of being a hoarder. I'm not. I just have sentimental things. So this is one of those things that I've kept throughout my life, because we give the opportunity to plant that little oak nut. And then it's our job as a community, our job as a staff, or our job as brothers and sisters to try to cultivate that. I also have one more thing from 1992. And this is Bob and Judy Williams, their own words. Thank you for being wonderful people you are, designed by God to be all you can be, fearful and wonderful, wonderfully made. With the agency to choose right over wrong, may God give you the courage to seek his will and do it. May Jesus show you his way and his example and words. And may the Holy Spirit direct you and give you peace and hope for today and tomorrow. And as they always sign things, Agape.
still, be still, and know. Still, still, be still, and know. Tenors. Still, be still, be still, know I am God. Be still, be still, know I am God. Altos. Be still, be still, be still, and know. Sopranos. I am God. Again. Sopranos. Altos. Tenors.
Do you love me? Yes, I do. For 66 years I've made you believe. For 68. And I do it all again. Yeah. You would too? Yep. Good. Love you, sweetie.
Are the colors fading? How did we get here, loving lazy? We've seen it before, know how it happens. Tired and bored, wanting some action, and it slips away. I want magic. You know it's good when the ending's tragic. Weathered and true and good to the vows we said in our youth. Now age they are louder, buried in our veins. I lose you or you lose me. Either way it won't be cheap. I wanna love you till it's dead. devastating until the dirt cries and my grave is waiting. Is it even worth it if there ain't heartbreak waiting? I wanna love you till it's devastating. Now would you hold me with all the weight of what we could be? Seen it before, know it can happen. Lifetime of joy, farewells and sadness. Now baby, that's romantic. 'Cause I'll lose you or you lose me. Either way, it won't be cheap. I wanna love you till it's devastating, until the dirt cries and my grave is waiting. Is it even worth it if there ain't heartbreak waiting? I wanna love you till it's devastating, till it's devastating.
Ring on my finger, tag on my toe, that means we made it. Generations after enforcing, amen, amen. Ring on my finger, tag on my toe, that means we made it. Generations after enforcing, amen, amen. Sing amen, 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 amen.
'Cause I lose you or you lose me. Either way, it won't be cheap. I wanna love you till it's devastating, until the dirt cries and my grave is waiting. Is it even worth it if there ain't heartbreak waiting? I wanna love you till it's devastating, till it's devastating.
Ring on my finger, tag on my toe,
Oh, that means we made it.
generations after enforcing, amen. Ring on my finger, tag on my toe,
That means we made it.
generations after enforcing.
Amen.
Still have somebody. Ring on my finger, tag on my toe. Ring on my finger, tag on my toe. That means we made it. That means we made it. That means we made it.
That means we made it.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
So I just want to thank you for showing up. And I don't mean today. I mean all the times that you showed up in my dad's life, in my family's life. Thank you.
Will you bow with us in a closing prayer? Holy One, our comforter and strength, our husband, our father, our grandfather, our friend is home. He has always walked, he has just walked into the loving arms and felt the embrace of your son. We are blessed with Bob's presence for 85 years, and yet our hearts say he wasn't with us long enough. So we thank you for the time we had to spend with him. His family and friends are grateful for the time that was given us to walk beside Bob on his life's path. Focus our mind and hearts on Bob's life. Let us celebrate each moment that we had with him. We give thanks from the fullness of our hearts for the life that we remember in this gathering. May the meaning of Bob's life, love, live in us. And may the light that he has given us shine on in our own lives and hearts and memories. Give us courage to face the coming days without Bob. Give us strength to pray in the face of things we don't understand. Give us strength to believe in the forgiveness and mercy you promised all of us. Give us the grace to entrust Bob to you. Give us the ever-increasing knowledge of you and your Son, so that we may one day understand why those who have so much living left to do leave so soon.
God, invite Bob to your table. Share with him his favorite foods. Play music that Bob loves. Give Bob eyes that can see how much we love and miss him. Give us eyes to see his smile in the sunrise. Give us the ears to hear his voice in the rain. Give peace to his family and friends, God, and to his restless spirit, and to the world. Help us to find the courage and the faith that we need each day to carry on. Open a way before us. Mend our hearts and teach us to be comforters for one another. Let us go into the world, glad that we knew and have loved Bob, free to weep for the loss of his presence among us, free to hold each other in our human frailty, empowered to live life to the fullest, giving thanks to you for the life of Bob and the example of a good person, loving husband and father, compassionate minister, and kind and generous friend. God, you alone can heal our broken hearts. You alone can wipe away our tears. You alone can give us the peace we need. You alone can give us the strength to carry on. Help us to trust you in our times of darkness. Shine into our lives with the light of your presence so that we may face the future with hope. Ease our pain until we are together again with Bob. Take our sadness and fill us with your spirit, giving us grace to trust in your promise of eternal life. Through Jesus Christ, our friend and Savior. Amen.
Send me forth with Christ's commission, fill my soul with you.
it.